Go away. Those two words cut straight through me. His voice still echoed in the room, bouncing off the walls as if they wanted to repeat the command again and again. I stood there in the middle of the living room, my coat draped half over my arm, staring at him. My brother, my own flesh and blood. His eyes were harder than I had ever seen them, cold in a way that felt foreign. I wanted to speak, to say something soft, something that might break the tension, but my mouth remained closed. My throat was dry, as if no words could pass through it. The children, who I had just helped set their plates at the table, looked back and forth between us. Their little faces were painted with confusion. Their hands rested on the table as though they sensed something was happening that was far bigger than they could understand. A wave of warmth and pain surged through my chest all at once. I had given so much these past weeks, these past months. Diapers, sandwiches, bedtime stories. I had listened to their dreams, wiped away their tears. I had been there when he couldn't, and now here I was, cast out as though I were an intruder. Go. Now. His voice broke something inside me. Not just because of the words themselves, but because of the way he said them. As if I had never mattered. As if all those little gestures, those hours, that love, had never existed. My legs felt like lead, but somehow they carried me a step backward. I didn't know what to do. Should I plead? Should I explain? Should I remind him of everything we had been through together? I turned my gaze toward the children. Their eyes were wide and wet, but neither dared to speak. But, I whispered, barely audible. His gaze was stone, unyielding. He turned his head away as if even the sight of me caused him pain. And in that moment I knew. I had to leave. I bent down and picked up my bag, my hands trembling. The zipper caught for a moment, almost as though even it didn't want me to go. My breath shook as I reached for the doorknob. Behind me I heard a chair scrape. Small feet pattered across the floor. "Are you leaving?" a small voice asked. I turned slowly. The youngest, his hair still messy from his afternoon nap, stood there. His eyes were huge, his lip trembling. My heart shattered. Every part of me wanted to kneel down, to hold him, to tell him everything would be all right. But I knew that if I stayed, I would only make it worse. "I have to go for a little while, sweetheart," I said softly, my voice breaking. "But I'm always here for you. Never forget that." He didn't nod. He didn't speak. He only looked at me, and I knew that image would be etched in my memory forever. His eyes asking for certainty that I couldn't give. I opened the door. The chill of the evening air hit my face. One last time I glanced over my shoulder. My brother still stood there, arms crossed, staring at the floor. The children sat at the table again, their eyes blank. It was as though the warmth of the house had walked out with me. Then the door closed behind me. The silence outside was deafening. Only my heartbeat pounded in my ears. I walked to the car, my fingers clenched around my bag, my breathing uneven. I slipped into the driver's seat, shut the door, and let my head fall against the steering wheel. And then the tears came. They poured down my face without restraint. Tears of pain, of anger, but mostly of incomprehension. How could he? How could he say that to me after everything I had done? After everything we had shared? My mind wandered back to our childhood, to the two of us playing in the same garden, laughing at the same jokes, fighting and making up again like siblings always do. I thought of the promises we had once made, that we would always be there for each other, that nothing could drive us apart. And now the distance felt greater than ever. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand and started the car. The engine hummed softly, but the sound felt unreal, as though I were still trapped in some nightmare. I drove away, down the street, watching the lights of his house shrink in my rearview mirror. Every meter I traveled felt like another tear in my heart. As though I wasn't just leaving his house behind, but part of myself too. And yet, deep inside, beneath all the layers of grief, there was a spark, a faint whisper that told me, this isn't the end. It can't be. Family runs too deep, too strong. Maybe this was a moment of breaking, but somewhere, somehow, there had to be a way to mend. For now, there was only silence. And the echo of his words, "Go away." That night, as I drove through the empty streets, the glow of the streetlights flickering past like silent guardians, my thoughts drifted backward. Not to the pain of the present, but to the days when everything had seemed so much simpler. When my brother and I were just children, untouched by the heaviness of life. He was only a few years older than me, but for me, he was always larger than life. Braver, louder, quicker. He climbed higher into the trees, jumped farther over the ditch, ran faster down the street. I followed close behind, admiring him, desperate to be his shadow. And sometimes he let me. He would laugh, sling his arm around my shoulder, and say, "Come on, we're a team." I remember those long summer days in the backyard of our childhood home. The grass tickled our bare feet, and together we created entire worlds. The old apple tree became our pirate ship. The sandbox was an island of buried treasure. We could play for hours, time slipping away until twilight crept in. Then Mother would call us inside for dinner, and we'd come running with sand in our hair and scratches on our knees, but always smiling. Of course, we fought too. Over who got the last cookie, who got the front seat in the car. Little rivalries, small storms that blew over in minutes. We'd be back on the couch side by side, watching cartoons, as if nothing had ever happened. As we grew older, things began to change. He was the first to move out. I can still see him packing up his room, the posters coming off the walls, the shelves growing bare. I cried quietly that night. For him, it was the start of an adventure. For me, it was the echo of an empty room. Yet he often came back on weekends, full of stories about his job, his friends, this new life beyond the walls of home. I hung on every word, proud and in awe. When he became a father, I saw him in a new light. I still remember the first time I held his baby in my arms. So small, so fragile, a tiny heartbeat against my chest. I saw the exhaustion in his face, the way responsibility weighed on him, but also the pride glowing in his eyes. And I felt proud too. Proud to be part of this moment, proud to stand beside him as he started this new chapter. I made myself a promise then. I will always be there for him. For them, for this family, and for a long time, I kept that promise. I babysat, I helped with meals, I read bedtime stories. I stayed overnight when things were chaotic, when panic crept into their nights. It never felt like a burden. If anything, it felt like a second home. But even within those golden memories, there were small cracks. Little comments from him that stung, though I tried to laugh them off. "You don't have to get so involved." Or, "You always stick your nose in my business." I told myself it was nothing, that he was just tired. But those words lingered like faint bruises. Looking back now, I see the signs more clearly. We were drifting apart little by little. Where I sought closeness, he seemed to crave distance. Where I thought I was helping, he perhaps saw interference. And yet, when I weigh the moments, the good still outweighs the bad. I still see us pedaling our old bicycles down the street, laughing so hard our stomachs ached. I hear our whispered conversations late at night, after the lights were out, when we'd share our biggest dreams. We were a team, two kids who believed nothing could separate us. Now I wonder, when did that change? When did the distance creep in, so quietly that we didn't even notice until it had become a canyon? I sighed heavily as I turned into my street that night. The summer air was warm, but inside I felt nothing but cold. I parked the car and sat there a moment longer, my hands resting on the steering wheel. Before my eyes, memories played like an old film. Our childhood, our bond, the promises we had made, and then his voice echoed again. "Go away." As if those words could erase the past. As if all those moments no longer mattered. But they did matter. They still lived inside me. They were part of who I was, and no matter how hard he tried to push me out, somewhere behind those hard eyes was still the boy I had followed, admired, loved. I closed my eyes, leaned my head back against the seat, and let a single tear slide down my cheek. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was just another chapter, no matter how painful, because you can't cut the roots of a tree, and he and I had grown from the same soil. When I think back to everything I gave, it isn't the arguments or the tension that come to me first. It's the children, their faces, their laughter, their tiny hands slipping into mine. From the very first moment I looked into their eyes, I knew my role would be more than just aunt. It felt as though I had been given a second calling, Not to replace their parents, but to stand beside them, to be another anchor in their small world, to love them as if they were my own. Maybe that's what bothered my brother. Maybe he thought I crossed a line, but I couldn't help it. My heart simply didn't know how to stop. I remember one morning when the oldest was sick, curled up on the couch with flushed cheeks and a fever burning through him. My brother had called me in a rush. "Can you come?" "I can't stay home today." Of course I came. I sat beside the child for hours, refreshing the cool cloth on his forehead, whispering that everything would be okay. His eyes fluttered closed as my hand stroked his hair. In that moment I felt needed, as though my presence made a difference. And then there was that sunny afternoon in the park. I had taken them out so their parents could rest. They ran barefoot across the grass, their laughter filling the air. I pushed the youngest higher and higher on the swing until he squealed, "Higher! Higher!" My heart was full to the brim. It felt like I was reliving my own childhood, only sweeter, because now I carried the joy of caring for them. It's the little things that remain carved into my memory. A surprise hug around my waist, a crumpled drawing handed to me with pride, a stick figure version of myself with a heart drawn beside it. A whispered "I love you" right before sleep claimed them. Those are the memories that made that night unbearable. While my brother's harsh voice told me to leave, everything in me screamed that I wasn't just leaving him. I was leaving them. Not by choice, but because I had no other option. Their eyes, wide and questioning, haunt me still. Children understand more than we give them credit for. They saw me. They felt my love. To them, I wasn't just a visitor, not just a babysitter. I was part of their daily rhythm, woven into their sense of home. And now I wonder, what do they feel? Do they miss me? Do they ask why I don't come anymore? Do they think I abandoned them? That thought cuts the deepest. Not long before it all broke apart, the oldest looked at me one evening and said, "You're my safe place." It came out of nowhere. I was clearing the table. He was sitting on the floor with a puzzle. I asked him what he meant, and he shrugged. "It's always calm with you. You never get mad." I swallowed hard, because I knew he sensed more than he should. He knew the tension at home. He felt the storms that adults thought they had hidden. And I was the place where his breathing slowed again. Who gives him that now? Questions like that keep me awake at night. The bond with my brother may be fractured, but the bond with the children, that's something deeper. It lives in my chest like a string tied tightly around my heart. Even if I can't see them, even if I can't hold them, they are part of me. Sometimes I dream of going back, of opening the door and hearing their voices shout, "She's here!" Of their little arms wrapping around me, of their hair tickling my cheek. I wake with tears on my pillow, the emptiness louder than ever. Perhaps that is what family really means, handing over your heart knowing it can be broken. And yet, I would do it all again. Every sleepless night watching fevers, every rainy walk, every laugh, every tear. Because the love was real. The love is still here. Even though my brother pushed me away, I know I will always carry them with me. Their voices, their laughter, their trust, it has become part of who I am. Maybe one day when they're older, they'll understand. They'll know I never chose to walk away, that it was never my decision to leave. Until then, I hold on to this love as a silent promise, because the children, they are the reason I keep hoping. The truth is, a rupture never begins in a single moment. It builds slowly, almost invisibly, like a hairline crack in glass that spreads until the whole pane shatters. Looking back, I see now that the tension had been there for a long time. At first like a faint shadow, later thickening until it filled every corner of the house. In the beginning, I hardly noticed. Small comments from my brother, easy to dismiss. A frown when I hugged the children too tightly. A sigh when I said something about their bedtime or their school projects. Little things, just grains of sand on the surface. But grains of sand pile up until they form a mountain. I remember one evening when I stayed for dinner. The children were giggling at the table, and I told them a story to quiet them down. Halfway through, my brother interrupted, his tone short. "They just need to eat. Enough with the chatter." I bit back my words, smiled awkwardly, and let it go. But inside, it stung. Later, in private moments, he would say things that lingered long after. "Do you really have to be involved in everything?" The words weren't sharp, but they stuck like thorns. I told myself he was tired, stressed from work, and the endless responsibilities of fatherhood. I tried to be understanding, so I stayed quiet. Still, the unease grew. Once I took the children to the library. They returned home, proud and excited, carrying stacks of books. I thought he'd be pleased. Instead, he looked at me and said flatly, "You don't have to arrange everything for them. They have parents, you know." His words hit like cold water. Was my care suddenly an intrusion? Maybe I should have pulled back then. Maybe I should have given him more space. But my heart didn't allow it. The children's eyes lit up when they saw me. They leaned into me for comfort. How could I deny them that? Still, I couldn't ignore the growing walls. I saw it in his wife's glances. Tired, wary, as though she wondered whether I was too present. I felt it in the way our conversations shrank, polite but distant. A house once full of warmth now held an invisible barrier I couldn't cross. I thought that if I just kept giving, if I just kept showing love, it would heal the rift. I cooked, I tidied, I bought small gifts for the children. I told myself that actions spoke louder than words. But sometimes giving too much feels like judgment to the one receiving. Maybe he felt my presence not as help, but as proof of his shortcomings. One night, after the children had gone to bed, we sat at the kitchen table with cups of tea. I tried to make light conversation, but he suddenly said, "I know you mean well, but sometimes it feels like you think you're more of a parent than I am." That sentence cut deep. Not because it was entirely untrue. I had felt almost like a second parent at times, but because it sounded like my love was a threat. I wanted to explain, to tell him I never wanted to take anything from him, that I only wanted to support him. But he looked away, his eyes on the window, and the conversation died in silence. After that night, I became hyper-aware. Every word, every gesture felt loaded. I found myself shrinking, laughing less, speaking more carefully. I walked on eggshells in his house, afraid of stepping wrong. But the strange thing is, the more I held back, the greater the distance grew. As though silence itself widened the gap, the children felt it too. Their glances flickered between us, sensing the heavy air, the quiet friction. They didn't ask questions, but their eyes said what their mouths could not. "Why is it so cold in here now?" I reassured myself with excuses. Families go through phases. Tension passes. Surely things would return to normal. But deep down, I knew something fundamental had shifted. The house, once a second home, became a place where I no longer breathed freely. Still, I kept going back. For them. For the promise I had made to myself. I didn't realize then that every small crack was leading us to that breaking point. To the night when his words would fall like knives. "Go away." Now looking back, I understand. No rupture comes suddenly. It's always the sum of 100 tiny fractures. And maybe I played my part. Maybe my love overflowed into something that felt like control. Maybe I was too present, too insistent, too unwilling to step back. But could I really have done otherwise? Could I have kept myself from loving them so deeply? From giving so much? I don't think so. The door slammed behind me, its echo still vibrating in my chest. It wasn't just wood and metal that had shut between us. It felt like a wall had dropped, thick and immovable, cutting me off from a part of my own life. I stood there on the porch, the glow of the house shrinking as the curtains closed over the windows. It was as if the house itself was rejecting me, telling me I no longer belonged. I took a deep breath, but the air felt heavy, like breathing through water. My eyes stung, my legs shook. Should I wait? Should I turn back? But my feet made the choice for me, carrying me slowly toward the car. The keys slipped from my hand and clattered on the stones. The sound echoed louder than it should have, sharp in the night air. I bent down, picked them up with trembling fingers, and pressed them into the lock. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Inside the car, I shut the door, and the silence pressed in on me, thick and merciless. My own breath was loud, ragged. I let my forehead fall against the steering wheel, and then the tears came, hot, unrelenting tears that blurred the world into streaks. My shoulders shook as sobs tore their way out of me. I pounded once against the steering wheel, not hard, but with the helplessness of someone who has no control left. How did it come to this? I started the engine, and the low hum filled the void. The headlights cut through the darkness as I pulled away from the curb. The street stretched long and empty ahead of me, every house dark, every window blank. I had driven these same streets so many times before, with laughter echoing in the back seat, with stories from the children filling the air. Now it was only me, and the silence pressed harder with every turn. I couldn't stop thinking of the children. Their eyes as I left. Their silence, which spoke louder than any words could. I replayed their laughter in my mind, their little voices calling my name, their arms reaching for me. The images hit me like knives. The road home felt endless. Every mile pulled me farther away from them, farther away from the warmth I had thought was permanent. The radio stayed off. Even music was unbearable. There was no melody that could match the sound of this pain. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe it was just anger, just exhaustion. Maybe tomorrow will be different. But deep down I knew better. Those words hadn't been a slip. They had been a line drawn, sharp and deliberate. When I finally pulled into my own street, the darkness of my house loomed ahead. I parked, hands still trembling, and sat in the car. For a long moment I couldn't bring myself to move. My house had always been quiet, but tonight the quiet felt hostile, as if even my own home wanted to remind me how alone I was. At last, I forced myself out. My bag slipped from my shoulder as I unlocked the door. The lock clicked, the door creaked open, and the silence inside swallowed me whole. No children's voices, no footsteps, no laughter, just the emptiness. I dropped my bag in the hallway and walked straight to the couch. I collapsed onto it, pulling a blanket around me as if fabric alone could replace the warmth I had lost. My face pressed into my hands, and the sobs came again, raw and unrestrained. The walls heard everything. When the storm inside me finally quieted, I sat there staring into nothing. My body ached from the weight of it all. My home felt foreign, stripped of comfort. It wasn't just that I had left my brother's house, it was as if I had left part of myself behind with them. I got up eventually, wandered into the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. The glass rattled in my shaking hands. I sipped, but the water felt heavy, like swallowing stones. I set it down and braced myself against the counter, closing my eyes, and that was when the voice inside me began. Was it my fault? Did I give too much? Did I cross a line without knowing? Or did he push me away because of his own pain? The questions spun like a wheel I couldn't stop. I thought of calling him, of begging for an explanation, but I couldn't bear the thought of hearing those same words again. Go away. So I sat in the silence and argued with myself instead. The night crept on. The clock ticked through every minute, mocking me with its patience. Sleep refused to come. I scrolled through photos on my phone, smiling faces, messy hair, drawings proudly held up to me. Each picture broke me a little more, and yet, somewhere deep in the night, a flicker of something else appeared. As I sat wrapped in my blanket, hollowed out by loss, I realized that I was still here, breathing, alive. The world hadn't ended, though it felt like it had. Maybe, just maybe, this was the place I had to begin again. The door slammed behind me, its echo still vibrating in my chest. It wasn't just wood and metal that had shut between us. It felt like a wall had dropped, thick and immovable, cutting me off from a part of my own life. I stood there on the porch, the glow of the house shrinking as the curtains closed over the windows. It was as if the house itself was rejecting me, telling me I no longer belonged. I took a deep breath, but the air felt heavy, like breathing through water. My eyes stung, my legs shook. Should I wait? Should I turn back? But my feet made the choice for me, carrying me slowly toward the car. The keys slipped from my hand and clattered on the stones. The sound echoed louder than it should have, sharp in the night air. I bent down, picked them up with trembling fingers, and pressed them into the lock. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Inside the car, I shut the door, and the silence pressed in on me, thick and merciless. My own breath was loud, ragged. I let my forehead fall against the steering wheel. And then the tears came, hot, unrelenting tears that blurred the world into streaks. My shoulders shook as sobs tore their way out of me. I pounded once against the steering wheel, not hard, but with the helplessness of someone who has no control left. How did it come to this? I started the engine, and the low hum filled the void. The headlights cut through the darkness as I pulled away from the curb. The street stretched long and empty ahead of me, every house dark, every window blank. I had driven these same streets so many times before, with laughter echoing in the back seat, with stories from the children filling the air. Now it was only me, and the silence pressed harder with every turn. I couldn't stop thinking of the children. Their eyes as I left. Their silence, which spoke louder than any words could. I replayed their laughter in my mind, their little voices calling my name, their arms reaching for me. The images hit me like knives. The road home felt endless. Every mile pulled me farther away from them, farther away from the warmth I had thought was permanent. The radio stayed off. Even music was unbearable. There was no melody that could match the sound of this pain. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe it was just anger, just exhaustion. Maybe tomorrow will be different. But deep down I knew better. Those words hadn't been a slip. They had been a line drawn, sharp and deliberate. When I finally pulled into my own street, the darkness of my house loomed ahead. I parked, hands still trembling, and sat in the car. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to move. My house had always been quiet, but tonight the quiet felt hostile, as if even my own home wanted to remind me how alone I was. At last, I forced myself out. My bag slipped from my shoulder as I unlocked the door. The lock clicked, the door creaked open, and the silence inside swallowed me whole. No children's voices, no footsteps, no laughter, just the emptiness. I dropped my bag in the hallway and walked straight to the couch. I collapsed onto it, pulling a blanket around me as if fabric alone could replace the warmth I had lost. My face pressed into my hands, and the sobs came again, raw and unrestrained. The walls heard everything. When the storm inside me finally quieted, I sat there staring into nothing. My body ached from the weight of it all. My home felt foreign, stripped of comfort. It wasn't just that I had left my brother's house. It was as if I had left part of myself behind with them. I got up eventually, wandered into the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. The glass rattled in my shaking hands. I sipped, but the water felt heavy, like swallowing stones. I set it down and braced myself against the counter, closing my eyes, and that was when the voice inside me began. Was it my fault? Did I give too much? Did I cross a line without knowing? Or did he push me away because of his own pain? The question spun like a wheel I couldn't stop. I thought of calling him, of begging for an explanation, but I couldn't bear the thought of hearing those same words again. Go away. So I sat in the silence and argued with myself instead. The night crept on. The clock ticked through every minute, mocking me with its patience. Sleep refused to come. I scrolled through photos on my phone, smiling faces, messy hair, drawings proudly held up to me. Each picture broke me a little more, and yet, somewhere deep in the night, a flicker of something else appeared. As I sat wrapped in my blanket, hollowed out by loss, I realized that I was still here, breathing, alive. The world hadn't ended, though it felt like it had. Maybe, just maybe, this was the place I had to begin again. The door slammed behind me, its echo still vibrating in my chest. It wasn't just wood and metal that had shut between us. It felt like a wall had dropped, thick and immovable, cutting me off from a part of my own life. I stood there on the porch, the glow of the house shrinking as the curtains closed over the windows. It was as if the house itself was rejecting me, telling me I no longer belonged. I took a deep breath, but the air felt heavy, like breathing through water. My eyes stung, my legs shook. Should I wait? Should I turn back? But my feet made the choice for me, carrying me slowly toward the car. The keys slipped from my hand and clattered on the stones. The sound echoed louder than it should have, sharp in the night air. I bent down, picked them up with trembling fingers, and pressed them into the lock. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Inside the car, I shut the door, and the silence pressed in on me, thick and merciless. My own breath was loud, ragged. I let my forehead fall against the steering wheel, and then the tears came. Hot, unrelenting tears that blurred the world into streaks. My shoulders shook as sobs tore their way out of me. I pounded once against the steering wheel, not hard, but with the helplessness of someone who has no control left. How did it come to this? I started the engine, and the low hum filled the void. The headlights cut through the darkness as I pulled away from the curb. The street stretched long and empty ahead of me, every house dark, every window blank. I had driven these same streets so many times before, with laughter echoing in the back seat, with stories from the children filling the air. Now it was only me, and the silence pressed harder with every turn. I couldn't stop thinking of the children, their eyes as I left, their silence, which spoke louder than any words could. I replayed their laughter in my mind, their little voices calling my name, their arms reaching for me. The images hit me like knives. The road home felt endless. Every mile pulled me farther away from them, farther away from the warmth I had thought was permanent. The radio stayed off. Even music was unbearable. There was no melody that could match the sound of this pain. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe it was just anger, just exhaustion. Maybe tomorrow will be different. But deep down, I knew better. Those words hadn't been a slip. They had been a line drawn, sharp and deliberate. When I finally pulled into my own street, the darkness of my house loomed ahead. I parked, hands still trembling, and sat in the car. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to move. My house had always been quiet, but tonight the quiet felt hostile, as if even my own home wanted to remind me how alone I was. At last, I forced myself out. My bag slipped from my shoulder as I unlocked the door. The lock clicked, the door creaked open, and the silence inside swallowed me whole. No children's voices, no footsteps, no laughter. Just the emptiness. I dropped my bag in the hallway and walked straight to the couch. I collapsed onto it, pulling a blanket around me as if fabric alone could replace the warmth I had lost. My face pressed into my hands, and the sobs came again, raw and unrestrained. The walls heard everything. When the storm inside me finally quieted, I sat there staring into nothing. My body ached from the weight of it all. My home felt foreign, stripped of comfort. It wasn't just that I had left my brother's house. It was as if I had left part of myself behind with them. I got up eventually, wandered into the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. The glass rattled in my shaking hands. I sipped, but the water felt heavy, like swallowing stones. I set it down and braced myself against the counter, closing my eyes. And that was when the voice inside me began. Was it my fault? Did I give too much? Did I cross a line without knowing? Or did he push me away because of his own pain? The questions spun like a wheel I couldn't stop. I thought of calling him, of begging for an explanation, but I couldn't bear the thought of hearing those same words again. Go away. So I sat in the silence and argued with myself instead. The night crept on. The clock ticked through every minute, mocking me with its patience. Sleep refused to come. I scrolled through photos on my phone, smiling faces, messy hair, drawings proudly held up to me. Each picture broke me a little more. And yet, somewhere deep in the night, a flicker of something else appeared. As I sat wrapped in my blanket, hollowed out by loss, I realized that I was still here, breathing, alive. The world hadn't ended, though it felt like it had. Maybe, just maybe, this was the place I had to begin again. The days that followed blurred together like endless rain. I went through the motions, work, meals, restless sleep, but everything felt flat, muted, as though someone had drained the color from my world. The emptiness was constant, a dull ache that refused to fade. What I missed most were the children. Their voices, their energy, the simple joy of their presence. I could still hear them in my head, echoes of laughter that weren't really there. Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps on the stairs, or giggles drifting in from the garden. But when I turned, it was only silence. Late at night, I scrolled through the photos on my phone. Bright smiles, sticky fingers holding ice cream cones, messy hair after afternoons in the park. There were drawings too, scribbles of hearts and stick figures labeled with my name. Each image filled me with warmth for a fleeting moment, and then cut me open again. They were proof of what I'd had and of what I'd lost. One evening, I picked up a stuffed toy they had once left at my house. I pressed it to my face, inhaling deeply. It still carried a faint scent of soap and childhood. My tears fell hot and fast. How can you grieve for someone who is still alive, just unreachable? That was what it felt like. Grief. Not the grief of death, but of absence. A grief with no rituals, no funerals, no final words. Just a wall of silence. And in some ways, that was worse. Death at least gives closure. This was only open-ended loss. I found myself replaying the smallest moments. Baking cookies together, the kitchen covered in flour. Singing bedtime songs while little eyelids grew heavy. Reading just one more story, even when it was far past their bedtime. Their laughter ringing through the park, their arms tightening around me in sudden hugs. These memories were my treasures, but also my torment. They reminded me not only of the children, but of the version of myself I had been with them. Loving, needed, complete. Without them, I felt hollow, as though part of my identity had been stripped away. At night, I dreamed of them. In my dreams, they were older, running toward me with open arms, asking why I had gone. I woke with my pillow damp, the ache heavier than before. Did they ask about me? Did they wonder why I no longer came? Did my brother tell them I was too busy, or worse, that I didn't care? The thought that they might believe I had abandoned them was unbearable. I tried to keep myself occupied. Walks in the park, books to distract my mind, cleaning the house until every surface gleamed. But reminders of them were everywhere. A playground swing creaking in the wind, a children's section in the bookstore. Even the sound of a child's laugh in a supermarket aisle could break me into pieces. The world seemed determined to remind me of what I had lost. And yet, in those moments of raw grief, something else flickered too. Gratitude. Because these memories, as painful as they were, also meant I had truly lived them. The love had been real. The bond had existed. Nothing could erase that. Perhaps that is what love in its purest form is. It endures even in absence. It doesn't vanish when the door closes. It stays, stubborn and alive, carving itself into your heart until it becomes part of you. One evening, I sat at my window with a cup of tea. The night sky stretched wide, the moon glowing above. I imagined the children looking at the same moon from their house, maybe just before bed. That thought brought me a strange comfort. No matter the distance, we were still under the same sky. I whispered softly into the night, "I'm still here. For you. Always." The words lingered in the quiet room, and for the first time in weeks, I felt not just sorrow, but a fragile kind of peace. The longing would never leave me, that much I knew. But maybe longing itself was proof of something beautiful, that the bond hadn't been destroyed, only stretched. That love, once given, can never truly disappear, and maybe, someday, they would understand. The weeks dragged on, silent and heavy. No message from my brother, no phone call, no sign that he wanted to bridge the distance. I could have reached out myself, I knew that. My fingers hovered over my phone more times than I could count. But fear always stopped me. Fear of silence on the other end. Fear of hearing those same words again. Go away. So I was left with myself. And myself was not easy company. The conversation started quietly, as whispers in my mind. Questions that spun around and around until they filled the whole room. Why did you let it get this far? Shouldn't you have stepped back sooner? Did you push too hard? No, you were helping. That's all you ever did. But maybe it was too much. Or maybe he saw his own fears in you, and you became his mirror, round and round with no conclusion. Every answer birthed another question. Every thought spiraled into doubt. At night, the voices grew louder. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, whispering into the darkness. Was I really so wrong? Deep down, I knew love could never be wrong. Messy, overwhelming, too much at times, but not wrong. My heart had given because that's what hearts do. I had cared for his children with everything in me. I had never wanted to hurt him, and yet I couldn't deny the possibility that from his side, it looked different. Maybe I was there too often. Maybe I filled spaces he felt should be his. Maybe my love meant as comfort, looked to him like judgment. That thought stung, but it also gave me clarity. Perhaps his anger wasn't only about me. Perhaps it was also about his own fears, his sense of failing. Two voices argued inside me. One was harsh, sharp, unrelenting. You caused this. You were too much. You made the children confused. The other was gentle, quieter but persistent. You gave what you could. You filled a need. You are not a villain. You are human, and you loved. Some days, the harsh voice won. On those days, I shrank under its weight, believing every accusation. Other days, the gentler voice broke through, reminding me of the truth in the children's eyes, the love in their hugs. I began writing down these conversations in a notebook. Long, messy lines, unfinished sentences, sometimes just questions with no answers. When I read them back, I saw how often I blamed myself and how rarely I offered myself forgiveness. One evening, I stood before the mirror. My eyes were red, tired, unfamiliar. I forced myself to say aloud, "I love you." The words sounded awkward, almost absurd, like I was speaking to a stranger. I repeated them again and again. My voice broke, tears welled, but I didn't stop until the words started to feel real. Maybe that was the first step toward healing, learning to hold myself the way I had always held others. Slowly, clarity seeped in. I could not undo what had happened. I could not change how he felt, but I could choose how I treated myself. I could choose to let go of anger, not for him, but for me. I could choose to forgive, not only him, but myself too. And with forgiveness came another realization. I needed boundaries. I had given so much, poured myself out so completely that I had disappeared into their lives. I had lost the line between where I ended and they began. And that wasn't love, not the healthy kind. I practiced in small ways. When a friend asked for help moving, my instinct was to say yes. But I stopped. I realized I was exhausted, that I needed rest. And for the first time in a long time, I said no. The word felt strange, but also freeing. I began to understand. Saying no doesn't mean refusing love. It means protecting it, preserving it. Because love given without boundaries burns you out until you have nothing left. Maybe, if there was ever another chance with my brother, I had to do it differently. I couldn't lose myself again. I had to show up with love, but also with strength. And so the conversations with myself shifted. Not only blame and questions anymore, but also small affirmations. I did what I could. I loved them deeply. That love is real and nothing can erase it. But I also need to love myself. One night, sitting with my notebook open, I wrote, "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over chains. Boundaries don't mean closing the door. They mean keeping myself whole. I will carry both." As I put the pen down, a strange calm washed over me. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of strength. Maybe this was what growth looked like. Not erasing the pain, but learning to carry it without breaking. Not denying the wound, but letting the scar make you stronger. And perhaps, just perhaps, these conversations with myself were the first steps toward something new. For days, I couldn't stop looking at the drawing. I had printed it out and slipped it into a small frame on the shelf where I could see it every time I walked into the room. The crooked lines, the smiling stick figures, the sun shining above. It wasn't just a child's sketch. It was proof. Proof that I was still part of their world, that the bond hadn't been erased. But it also became a gentle push, a whisper inside me. Do something. The thought terrified me. Every option seemed dangerous. A phone call? What if he didn't answer? Or worse, what if he answered with the same cold words? A message? Too impersonal. A letter? Too heavy. I was stuck between fear and longing. One night, I sat at the table with a pen and paper in front of me. I tried to write, but the words stumbled. Too long, too defensive, too desperate. I tore sheet after sheet, the paper piling up around me like the wreckage of failed attempts. Finally, I was left with only 3 simple lines. I miss the children. I miss you. I hope we can talk again someday. It felt raw, stripped down, but honest. I folded the note, slid it into an envelope, and wrote his name on the front. The next morning, with my heart pounding, I dropped it into a mailbox. As it slid inside, I felt both relief and dread. Then came the waiting. Days passed. Each vibration of my phone sent my pulse racing. But the screen remained silent. I began to convince myself he had thrown the note away without reading it. that he had seen my handwriting and decided once and for all to let the silence stand. And then, one Sunday afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message. From him. Maybe we can talk. Not for long, but for a bit. My breath caught. My hands shook as I reread it. The words were cautious, almost guarded, but they were an opening. A crack in the wall, enough to let a sliver of light through. We agreed to meet at a cafe. Neutral ground. Not his house, not mine. No children, no distractions. Just us, two siblings, facing what we had both avoided. On the day of the meeting, my heart thudded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. My palms were damp, my steps unsteady as I pushed open the cafe door. He was already there, sitting at a small table by the window. His posture was closed, arms crossed, gaze turned outward. Yet when his eyes met mine, I thought I saw something soften. Or maybe I only hoped I did. I walked over, offered a hesitant smile, and sat across from him. "Thank you for coming," I said quietly. He nodded, but said nothing. The silence was heavy, thick as fog. I realized that if I didn't speak, the moment might dissolve. So I took a deep breath and began. "I don't want to fight with you. That's the last thing I want. I know I was around a lot, maybe too much. But everything I did because I love you. Because I love them." His jaw tightened, his eyes dark. "It felt like you were taking my place," he said finally, his voice low. The words hurt, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I understand why it felt that way," I replied. "That was never what I intended. I never wanted to replace you. I just wanted to support you. Maybe I went too far. Maybe I should have stepped back." He rubbed his hand over his face, a gesture of weariness. For the first time, his voice cracked slightly. "I felt like I wasn't enough, like my kids preferred you. And that broke me. My chest tightened. I saw beneath the anger a man struggling. My brother, not my enemy. You are enough," I said softly. "I've always known that. I admire you more than I've said. But maybe I didn't show that. Maybe all my helping made you feel small instead of supported. For that, I'm sorry." We sat in silence. Around us, the cafe clattered with cups and quiet chatter. But for me, the world had shrunk to this table. Then he said something that made my heart leap. "The kids ask about you." Tears pricked my eyes instantly. "They do?" He nodded. "Especially the oldest. He drew you that picture. He wanted you to have it." My voice broke into a whisper. "That drawing saved me." For the first time in months, his eyes softened. He looked down at his coffee, then back at me. Maybe we can find a way." Slowly. You could see them. Not all the time, not like before, but sometimes. I nodded quickly, swallowing my tears. "Anything, however small, it's enough." And for a brief moment, I saw him. The boy I had once known, the brother who had been my teammate in childhood adventures. Not perfect, not whole, but real. The conversation didn't last long. Maybe half an hour, but it was enough. Enough to prove the wall wasn't unbreakable. Enough to give me something I hadn't dared to believe in for so long. The possibility of rebuilding. When we stood to leave, I didn't hug him. We weren't there yet, but as I walked out of the cafe, I carried something new inside me. Not certainty, not resolution, but a spark turned into a flame. After that meeting in the cafe, something inside me shifted. Not relief, not the illusion that everything was fixed, but air. Fresh air flowing into a room that had been locked tight for months. The door wasn't wide open, but it wasn't shut anymore either. Still, the days that followed weren't easy. My brother and I didn't rush to see each other again. Messages came sparsely, careful, measured. It was clear we were both cautious, testing the fragile bridge we had begun to rebuild. And in that space, I learned something I had been avoiding. Forgiveness is not only about the other person. It's also about yourself. At night, memories of that evening still replayed, the way his words had struck me, the sound of "go away" echoing through my mind. Every time anger would spark inside me. How could he? How could my own brother treat me like that? But then another voice spoke, softer but insistent. He was hurting too. He was afraid. His anger wasn't just about you. It was about him. I began to see it differently. He wasn't only lashing out at me. He was lashing out at his own insecurities, his own fear of not being enough as a father. My love, meant as support, had become a mirror he didn't want to look into. That realization didn't excuse his words. It didn't erase the pain, but it made him human again in my eyes. And slowly, I let go of my anger. Not because he deserved it, but because I couldn't carry it any longer. Forgiving him meant freeing myself. But I also knew forgiveness wasn't enough. If I wanted this bond to survive, I needed boundaries. For years, I had poured myself into his home, his children, his life, until there was little of me left for myself. I blurred the line between my love and my identity. I measured my worth in what I gave. And when he rejected me, it felt like I had lost not just him, but who I was. I couldn't live like that again. I practiced in small ways. When a friend asked for help with a project, my automatic response was yes, but I paused. I noticed how tired I was, how much I needed rest, and for once I said no. The word felt foreign, but strangely powerful. I realized boundaries weren't walls. They were doors. They allowed love in, but also gave me the right to close them when I needed to breathe. And I knew this was how it had to be with my brother too. If I was going to be part of their lives again, it had to be with balance. I couldn't take on the role of second parent. I couldn't carry every burden. I could love, but I couldn't lose myself. One evening, I wrote in my notebook, "I forgive him, not because he was right, but because I refused to stay chained to that night." I forgive myself too, for giving so much, for losing sight of my own limits. Love with no boundaries is not love. It is erasure. This time I choose both love and myself. Those words stayed with me, a compass guiding me forward. Weeks later, he sent a short message. "Would you like to come by? The kids keep asking." My heart leapt. I typed back carefully, "Yes, but let's take it slow. One step at a time." When I walked into their home again, the children ran to me instantly, their arms around me, their laughter bubbling. My throat tightened with tears I held back. Their joy was pure, untouched by the rift that had nearly torn us apart. I looked up and saw him watching from the doorway. His expression was reserved but not hostile. For the first time, I saw not anger, but a kind of weary acceptance. And maybe, just maybe, a hint of gratitude. It wasn't the same as before. It never would be. But maybe that was a good thing. Because this time, I wasn't the same either. I wasn't there to fix everything, to carry every load. I was there because I chose to be, and because I knew where I ended and where they began. Forgiveness had opened the door. Boundaries would help keep it steady. For the first time, I believed we could move forward, not by pretending the past never happened, but by learning from it. The weeks that followed felt different. Not lighter, not as though everything had been magically restored, but steadier, as though the ground beneath my feet was no longer crumbling, but firm enough to carry me forward. I visited his home again, but carefully, sparingly. Sometimes only for an afternoon, sometimes just long enough to read a story or share a meal. The children's joy was immediate and unfiltered. They ran to me with laughter, their arms clinging tightly, their voices spilling over with excitement. In their embrace, I felt something I had long feared lost: belonging. My brother stayed cautious. He hovered at the edges, not unfriendly, but guarded. Our conversations were brief, polite. We didn't revisit that night, and maybe we didn't need to. The silence between us carried its own understanding, that we had hurt each other. But neither of us wanted to let the wound define us forever. The real change, I realized, was in me. Before, I had thrown myself into their lives so fully that I disappeared within them. I gave endlessly, believing that love meant sacrifice without limit. But I see now that love without boundaries consumes itself. It becomes dependence, desperation. This time, I showed up differently. I no longer tried to fix everything. I didn't linger until exhaustion hollowed me out. I didn't measure my worth in how much I carried for them. Instead, I came as myself, present, loving, but whole. And strangely, that made every moment more precious. The laughter of the children, the quiet moments reading together, the simple act of being invited back into their home, all of it shone brighter because I no longer held it with clenched fists. I held it with open hands, knowing it wasn't mine to control. At home, I often sat with a candle lit on the table, notebook open in front of me. I reread the words I had written in darker times, the pain, the anger, the endless questions. And I saw how far I had come. I didn't despise those pages. They were part of the journey, the proof of what I had endured. But they no longer chained me. One evening I wrote, "Strength isn't never falling. It's rising again after the fall. Strength is choosing love without losing yourself. Strength is knowing that even broken bonds can hold if you rebuild them with care." For the first time in months, I felt proud. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't, but because I had faced the storm and was still standing, stronger, steadier, clearer about who I was. I thought back often to that night when he had told me to leave. The sound of his voice, the weight of the silence afterward. It had crushed me then, but now I saw it differently. That moment, as painful as it was, had also been the breaking point that forced me to grow. Without it, I might never have learned where I ended and others began. Without it, I might never have discovered the strength that was mine all along. Perhaps that is the strange gift of pain. It breaks us open, but it also reveals what was hidden inside. One afternoon, I walked through the park near my home. The sky was a clear, endless blue. Children ran across the grass, their voices ringing out. I closed my eyes, lifted my face to the sun, and let the warmth wash over me. In that moment, I felt peace. Not because I had everything I wanted, not because my relationship with my brother was healed beyond doubt, but because I knew I could face whatever came. I had love and I had boundaries. I had forgiveness and I had myself. I thought of the children, of their small arms around me, of their laughter echoing in my ears. I thought of my brother, cautious but present, his eyes softer now than they had been in months. And I thought of myself, not the broken version who drove home that night in tears, but the one who had risen, scarred but stronger. I whispered into the breeze a quiet prayer of gratitude. Thank you. For the pain, for the lessons, for the love that remains. The wind carried my words away, and I knew they didn't need to return. They had already done their work. As I walked back home, I realized that the story wasn't finished. Family never is. There would be good days and bad, laughter and silence, closeness and distance. But I no longer feared the unknown, because whatever happened, I had found something unshakable within myself. New strength.